When the cost of something drops to a point where people can afford to lose, actually no one loses. For decades, China's rise seemed unstoppable. It was the world's factory. Cities worked day and night. Production lines burned until morning. Prices fell every year. At some point, Western countries simply dropped out of the race. China's victory looked almost like an art form: speed, order, and scale. But every incredible thing has a price. Today, China's greatest asset, its ability to produce cheaper, faster, and in larger volumes, is also what has erased parts of itself. Welcome to the Historian's Finance blog. Here, money, power, and history intersect. And nothing is as straightforward as it seems. China's story is actually the endgame of modern capitalism. How a system obsessed with growth eventually consumes itself. How did the world's largest economy get eaten by its own efficiency? When did efficiency itself turn into a destructive force? In 1978, Deng Xiaoping came to power and demolished a rigid socialist doctrine. "Getting rich is not shameful," he said. Translate the text into Spanish: hasta el patriotismo. This sentence had a transformative effect on China the very next day. Peasants became entrepreneurs. Towns were turned into production hubs. Investors from Japan, the US, and Europe rushed in because China had low labor costs, endless potential workers, and a government willing to do business. Special economic zones were created. No strict state regulations, no ideological battles. Only one goal: attract investment and boost exports. And these zones performed extraordinarily well. Shenzhen, for example, once a fishing village, now a city of millions. By the 2000s, China wasn't just growing. It was consuming the world's resources: steel, coal, copper, and oil. Any Western company that wanted to keep producing moved their manufacturing to China. If a product was made, sooner or later it carried the Made in China label. But this rapid rise came with a dangerous trend. To succeed meant being cheaper than everyone else. Cities lowered land prices, taxes, and even labor costs to attract factories. Companies lowered prices, lowered profits, and lowered quality. Everyone pushed for growth. No one thought about sustainability. This was a race to the bottom that looked like progress. For a while, everything seemed fine. The machine had a strong reputation. Billions of workers migrated from city to city, willing to work long hours. Meanwhile, Western consumers were enjoying themselves. $5 shirts, $300 phones. Everything was budget-friendly. But after a few cycles, the system began to overheat. Local officials were in debt. To pay it off, they needed more revenue. So they started building more factories and more infrastructure. By 2015, China's steel capacity alone surpassed that of every other country. Production grew faster, but demand stayed the same. Prices began to fall. Here was the turning point. When revenues fell, factories didn't reduce production. On the contrary, they increased output to reduce losses. And this is where a new idea emerged: involution, more effort, less return. This was no longer a personal experience. It became a widespread industrial reality. Companies in China began competing not by innovating, but simply by surviving. Price cuts, price cuts, price cuts. When one person lowers the price of something, everyone else lowers it too. Profits shrink. No one can win, because stopping means losing ground in the system. The result? Solar panels sold at rock-bottom prices. Electric vehicles flooding stores. Profits falling. But production still increasing. This is no longer called capitalism. This is capitalism eating its own tail. China had faced these crises before. In the 2000s, the steel and coal industries collapsed, and the government cut capacity. Factories were merged. Thousands were laid off. So back then it was seen not as an economic move, but a political one. Today's inconsistency is this. The problem isn't limited to one sector. It's the entire model. Factories may look successful on paper, but politically they cannot be shut down. Because China has a system that rewards action, not perfection. The government knows this. Profits are falling, debts are rising, and wages are stagnant. Yet the official language never changes. Expand, develop, continue. Because if the machine stops, the illusion stops as well. In the 2020s, China still seems strong from the outside. Solar, wind, and hydropower, the greatest achievements in history, were powering the world. But internally, profit margins were shrinking. Growth no longer created wealth. It only eroded what already existed. Economists call this overcapacity. But in China, overcapacity isn't always considered a mistake. Sometimes it's used as a strategy. Take solar panels, for example. By 2023, China had produced more panels than the world needed. Prices dropped 40%. Many companies went bankrupt, but the giant firms kept producing. The same goes for electric vehicles. More than 100 brands fighting for the same pie. Everyone lowering prices, the government giving subsidies to prevent total collapse. Yet production keeps rising, the cycle continues. Result? In the first half of 2024, industrial profits fell by more than 20%. Exports are rising, but profits are not. And here's another irony. Sometimes this strategy is intentional. China takes losses in certain sectors to eliminate global competitors. It floods the market with cheap products. When rivals can't hold on, China becomes the last one standing. This strategy was used in steel, shipping, and rare metals. But this time it's not about solar panels or steel, it's about the technologies of the future. This may work short-term, but long-term it creates a huge problem. Because once every industry gets addicted to state support, true competition disappears. Innovation dies. The system's quality begins to erode. The greatest danger for a country emerges when it loses its sense of purpose. Today, China's goal is growth. How, why, for whom, doesn't matter. Local governments need factories to pay their debts. Banks need to keep lending to those factories. The central government wants everything to look stable. Everyone is helping everyone else stay alive. So everyone keeps producing under any condition. But now this growth isn't filling people's pockets. It's only filling warehouses. From the outside, it looks great for the world. Cheap prices, cheap technology. But inside, wages aren't rising and consumption is weak. And that's why China can't recover its economy right now. It leaves society to fend for itself. It exports deflation to the world while being stuck internally. History shows us this. Every empire, once it reaches the peak of efficiency, faces the same test. Too much production, falling prices, stagnant income, and eventually a break in balance. This is exactly what China is experiencing today. Growth still exists, but it isn't creating wealth. Production still exists, but it isn't generating profit. Competition still exists, but it's not triggering innovation. It's only lowering prices. This isn't development, it's industrial decline. And history tells us one more thing. Cheap prices always come at a high cost. Because a system can optimize everything, but when it forgets balance, what it destroys ultimately is itself.